Manchester United, Henry. What do you make from today's meeting that has not led to a conclusion that we're aware of just yet?
Well, not a lot, really. I mean, I'm sure they had a lot to talk about. I hope they weren't watching videos of Manchester United's recent performances. I think there has to be some sympathy for Ten Hag in terms of the injuries. Maguire, the latest, I think Garnacho as well, is withdrawn from the Argentina squad. So, yeah, some sympathy for him there. He's had a horrendous run. But I think they can also look at, is the money that he is being given properly spent? £200 million in the summer. Have Manchester United improved? No. £600 million in his reign. Have they improved? No. OK, they've won 2 trophies, but can you see an identity? And if they're sitting around the table and they can say, we can see an identity and we can see a development in Manchester United under Ten Hag, then fantastic. I mean, it's, you know, that's pretty impressive. But what they can, if they are going to get rid of Ten Hag, that doesn't solve all the problems. The problems have been, you know, the drifting of the leadership, whether it's in the dressing room, whether it's in the dugout, that has been going on for a long time. The Glazers are ultimately responsible, and that's up for Ineos and Ashworth and Brailsford and Ratcliffe to address. But, you know, the players also have to take responsibility. So you can get rid of Ten Hag, but the culture remains. That's been a problem for a long time. The underperformance of the players, you know, may remain. They have to start taking responsibility. Everyone, in whatever job you do, you have to take individual responsibility. So there's an individual and collective failure there. So look, there are many problems they're going to have to look at beyond the manager.
A lot for Manchester United to try and unpack. Miguel, is something that perhaps counts in Ten Hag's favour, the influence he seems to have had in recruitment? Would it be difficult to sack him with so many new players?
Of course, the flip side of that would be Sunday's lineup, which I know he got the 0-0 result, which possibly saved his job. But there was obviously bafflement. I mean, especially given, say, and this is where you kind of come to the confusion about all this. So throughout last season, as Henry's mentioned there, Ten Hag did have an injury crisis. I think that is a very fair caveat in assessing last season. But one of the reasons that was painted as such a problem, say, was because he didn't have Alessandro Martinez, who was seen as key to his tactics, and it was almost seen as a negative, or at least, you know, an issue that he had to bring in Johnny Evans and Harry Maguire. And now on Sunday, where he's trying to save his job, he actually jettisons the 2 Ajax centre-halves who he knows, Martinez and now Matthijs de Ligt, who was key to the best achievement of his career, the 2019 run with Ajax, and brings back in Maguire and Evans. And I think that's where this is baffling. And we've all heard, I suppose, the lines about leaving 360 million worth of recruitment on the bench. I mean, just from, I suppose, trying to glean what's going to happen at Manchester United. And at the moment, we just don't know. But the words we keep hearing are, you know, process-led in terms of these sort of discussions. That is essentially Ratcliffe and the leadership team around him trying to put out as much evidence as possible for every potential scenario. And I do wonder whether just the moment, and I wouldn't make any predictions on this, given how it's gone so far, but they just maybe don't feel there is a suitable candidate that can step in. And it's why I think the preference has been to persevere with Ten Hag. Now, on one level, I think it is worth stressing, whatever about kind of the merit of a manager losing his job, the argument whether he should lose his job, it's hard not to have some human sympathy for Ten Hag, given this is the second time he's gone through this in a year. But of course, that raises another issue, which is the pressures involved with managing Manchester United, which I think is part of selecting a potential candidate.
Yeah, he's confident apparently of being there for the Brentford game, or assuming he will be on the 19th of October. Henry, is one complexity here that maybe the season's already gone in terms of the league, and what is achievable, what is salvageable for any manager coming in at this stage, given the distance between United and the top teams?
Well, I think at the start of the season, no one seriously thought that Manchester United would challenge for the league. I think the limit of their ambitions was to try and get a Champions League position, but they're 14th at the moment, so that's looking pretty distant. But the ethos of Manchester United should be about fighting, and they should actually absolutely try and sort of pursue and get as high up as the table as possible. I mean, Mig's right. I mean, there has to be some sympathy for Ten Hag, but you also have to consider that any other club with an impatient fan base, and Manchester United's fan base have just been unbelievably patient. I'm talking about the fans in the ground, the supporters who go home and away, and they have supported the team, they've supported the shirt, even though they've clearly, many of them have got issues with Ten Hag. They've done the Sir Alex Ferguson thing and backed the manager. Any other club, he would have been run out of town by now. So, you've got to think of the fans in all these. But look, Mick's right. I mean, if you get rid of him, who do you bring in? I mean, Ruud van Nistelrooy, short term. Thomas Tuchel comes with baggage. Gareth Southgate can't get a team over the line. Graham Potter, has he got the personality to deal with probably the most scrutinised managerial position in the country after England's? It's all very well saying let's run him out of town, but who is there? So they're bigger issues than Ten Hag here.
We've got a contentious moment in Manchester United's game against Tottenham, with Bruno Fernandez issued a red card for serious foul play.
That's awful, mate. That's a red card for me. Red card.
Right, you got runners.
100%. 100%.
Right.
On-field decisions, red card.
Cav checking the on-field decision of red card delay. So it's a high foot. So it's not studs. Show me another angle, please. So it's shin height. Does he rake down?
Got another angle coming back in.
It's a deliberate act.
Move away, you've come a long way, it looks rubbish.
He's made no attempt to play the ball. The angle you start seeing on broadcast doesn't necessarily show it's with studs.
There is a slip, but then there's an action which makes contact with the shin.
Yeah. I think ref's call.
That's
yeah.
Yeah. Cav, I'm confirming the on-field decision of red card, serious foul play. Check complete.
Thank you.
So the red card was obviously rescinded after the game. So I guess that means that you agree with it. It was a mistake on the day.
Yes, I think it was. I think the red card was correctly overturned on appeal. We hear on the audio the assistant referee coming with the information around this being, from his position, a red card offence, and the referee takes that advice and issues the red. When you look back on the footage, you see that the contact is high.
Yeah.
Bruno Fernandez slips first. He puts his foot out to stop Maddison. It's not an attempt for the ball. From the assistant referee's position, he's got a good view. He's got a nice open view. It's a better viewing angle than what the referee has got. It looks like there's studs there going into the shin. And if there is, this would be a red card. But it's just a slight misread. When the VAR checks it, he forms the opinion that the referee's call is not clearly wrong because he sees the action with the high contact, no attempt to play the ball, with some force, and therefore decides in his professional judgment that the referee's call is not clearly wrong. I think it is. I think if you see this, because it's the side of the foot, there's absolutely no studs. Because there's no driving the foot into the opponent, it's more of a tripping action. There's no excessive force, there's no endangering the safety of Maddison in this case. So when you have the benefit of seeing this in the way we can here, then we think that this should have been an intervention. We think the VAR supported the on-field call, the referee's call, and should have sent the referee to the screen to have a look at this angle.
Yeah, well, I was just about to say that. When I watched it to start with, I thought, ooh, he's in trouble. That could be a red. So I don't blame the referee, or the assistant for that matter, giving a red. The surprising bit is that it wasn't rectified there and then on the day.
Yeah, we've debriefed this. I've spoken to the VAR. He accepts that the referee's call in this case was clearly wrong. In the moment, he formed the opinion it wasn't quite at that threshold. That's a judgment in itself, and we've been pretty good this season in hitting the mark on those ones. This one was an error, and the learning, as always, is taken from it. But again, the key thing here is that the contact doesn't have excessive force. It doesn't endanger the safety of the opponent when you see it like we're seeing it here, even though I understand why the on-field officials, particularly the assistant referee, thought in real time it was.
Let's just talk about the assistant referee's role in this for a minute, because it struck me listening to that clip that Chris Kavanagh, the referee, said nothing, said next to nothing. It was the assistant that was really vocal in saying 100% red. As a referee, You haven't refereed at the highest level. Are you happy with that? If I was a referee, I'd be thinking, let me make my decision, and you're the assistant referee, the clue's in the name, really, and maybe assist me with the decision. But he was very vocal, and Chris Kavanagh said nothing. I'm just wondering in the relationship there. You happy with that?
Yeah, I mean, the officials work as a team. That's good, actually, because it helps you understand your own kind of roles and responsibilities.
Yeah. And he had a great view of it as well.
He did. There's an angle that shows he's got a really open view. It's a better view than the one that the referee had. And if you see something and you're clear in your own mind as to what you've seen, then I think you have a responsibility to give information to the referee to get that decision right as a team. The skill is recognising when you've got the best view. In this case, obviously, the assistant felt he did and communicated. If I'm a referee that's unsighted, I would welcome that intervention, of course. I hope it's going to be correct. This one was slightly off the mark, but working as a team is pretty normal in these circumstances.
First, the Manchester United leadership team have just finished their monthly executive meeting. On the agenda was the future of the manager, Erik ten Hag. Let's speak to Kaveh Solokol, who's been waiting outside that meeting for 6 long hours. Kaveh, as it stands right now, is Erik ten Hag still the Manchester United manager?
Yes, he is the Manchester United manager. We haven't had any indication that a decision has been taken to change managers at Manchester United. Having said that, this was a very long meeting. It started this morning just after 10 o'clock. It went on till about a few minutes ago. We managed to get some pictures of Sir Jim Ratcliffe and also Sir Dave Brailsford leaving through the back exit of Ineos's headquarters in central London. I think they took the decision to leave by the back door because we are right bang in the centre of London, because there were quite a few TV crews and paparazzi here. A big crowd had gathered outside the front entrance where I'm now standing, and I think the decision was taken that there were too many people blocking the entrance, so it made more sense for Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Sir Dave Brailsford to leave by the back door. Now, I think we should stress that this was a routine executive committee meeting for Manchester United. They have one of these meetings every month. But of course, today, one thing that would have been discussed, which is also normally discussed during the season, is first team performances. And of course, there is a general feeling that some of the performances haven't been good enough. I'm thinking specifically of the defeats to Tottenham and Liverpool. And the executives at Manchester United want to get to the bottom of what is going wrong. Obviously, they're aware of all the discussions and the speculation outside that maybe now is the right time to part company with Erik ten Hag, especially because we've entered an international break. But there is no indication so far from this meeting that any kind of decision has been made to part company with Erik ten Hag. I think what will be interesting later on this evening, perhaps in the next few hours or so, is if Manchester United release any kind of official statement. Now, normally, after a routine executive committee meeting, they would not release a statement about what happened at the meeting unless a major decision was taken. If a major decision has been taken, then obviously United would release an official statement.
We saw just now, once again, the pictures from the game at Aston Villa where all the footballing top brass were there. In a line, Jim Ratcliffe and Dave Brailsford and Dan Ashworth and Omar Barada and Jason Wilcox. Is all that, and the fact that the meeting, I know it's a scheduled one, but it went on for 6 hours, does that justifiably in the mind of a Manchester United fan suggest something is happening here?
Well, I mean, you know, sometimes you just have to hold up your hands and say, I don't know. You know, honestly, my honest answer to you is I don't know. I can stand here and speculate and say that, you know, it is strange that the meeting went on for so long. Somebody like Sir Jim Ratcliffe is obviously a busy man. He's only in the UK for a certain number of days a year. Would he take up the whole day just talking about United business if they weren't talking about Erik ten Hag's future? Look, I don't know. I wasn't in the room, unfortunately. What I do know for sure is that they did discuss United's recent performances, and I'm sure the position of Erik ten Hag was discussed as well. Now, I wouldn't be the first person they would tell if they decided to part company with Erik ten Hag. If the decision was made to part company with him, I know for a fact that they would go through the proper channels. But as I said, at the moment, I do not have any indication that United have made a decision to change manager. This was a routine meeting, and if a decision has been made to remove Erik ten Hag from his post, that would be communicated first through official channels.
With Manchester United, it's been the story from midweek, really, that 3-3 draw in Europe at Porto. Erik ten Hag supposedly under some pressure. All the big wigs were there from Manchester United's point of view. There was some talk in the media, a bad defeat to Villa, and he could lose his job. So what's your takeaway from what you saw today, Dan? And is there room for optimism, or was a 0-0 draw kind of symptomatic of a Manchester United team that's at 14th in the league and have scored only 5 Premier League goals so far this season?
Yeah, I think the latter, Robbie. I think that, it is rinse and repeat for this team. And I think it has been for so long. And you look at it and it's like, when does it become the fact that it's not actually the manager to blame all the time? Because they've had some top-class managers. They've had a lot of different managers. But it was obvious, I think they went there to Aston Villa today to defend as well as they could and hopefully get a couple of chances on the counter-attack. And I think the problem that you have from a game like today, if you're Ten Hag, the ownership are going to be looking at the two clubs.
Yeah.
And when you look at the situation with Emery, he took over, I think, 6 months after Ten Hag. And look what he's done, how he's, changed the fortunes of that team, got them into the Champions League on very, very little money compared to what Ten Hag spent. I think the simple fact, a lot of Ten Hag signings were on the bench. Not really seeing an identity at the moment. I'm not seeing a style of football that suits the players. Well, this is a conversation, Robbie, that you and me could probably have had 2 years ago, 3 years ago.
Yeah.
For it's the same thing. So it has to be a lot deeper than just bringing in a new manager and that will solve things, because United have had some world-class managers since Sir Alex Ferguson left, and they've not been able to fix the problem. It's like any manager comes in and they have that sort of little bit of a bounce, maybe the first season, and then it just tails off, and the ending has been seen by everybody so many times.
Dare I play devil's advocate? Because it seems, talking from the leadership group led by Dan Ashworth and Omar Barada, Jason Wilcox, the people around the football side of the business, that there seemed to be a sense that there was calm. They weren't looking to rush to make a decision. They want to give him as much time. And I heard a really interesting quote from, it was Graham Potter, actually, on Monday Night Football on Sky, our partners in the UK. He was in this week. And he talked about his time at Brighton. And something really hit home to me, Dan, when he said, I was set up for success at Brighton because behind the scenes, all the things were in place and everything was sort of functioning properly for me to be the manager and be successful. Now, to be fair to Erik ten Hag, and listen, I've been critical at times, and listen, we're 2.5 years in, and I still don't quite know the system. We've got a couple of cups, we have a couple of performances now and then, but there's no consistency. But for Ten Hag, in sort of in his defence, could we say that structure behind the club hasn't been there for huge club like Manchester United, like the recruitment we've seen, the technical directors, the sporting directors, all those things that successful clubs seem to have, Manchester United are just now getting in place. And so, in some ways, doesn't Ten Hag deserve the chance to see if, with that setup, he can improve things? We can see that progression that you're talking about, and the style of football maybe that is more linked to the style of football from when you were back in the day and Sir Alex Ferguson was around the football club.
See, I do see that point, but I think that my own honest opinion, the reason that Ten Hag is still at the club is because there was a lack of alternative that really stuck out.
It should never be a reason you stay in a job, really, should it?
Exactly. Exactly. But I think, from that side of things, he probably kept the job by default. If you go back 5, 6, 7 years, there was always, there's always a huge pool of managers that you looked at and thought, wow, you know what, they could do a job at X, Y, and Z. Now, the only problem that you have, because you talk about now the leadership group, you talk about everything behind the scenes, and I agree 100%. If things aren't okay off the pitch, they're never going to be right on the pitch. And we've seen clubs the way they go about it. Manchester United were playing catch-up for so long. Even they were like 7, 8, 9, 10 years behind some teams in terms of having a sporting director. Problem Manchester United have now, they're not going to attract the best players, because the best players are going to have choices of probably 4, 5, or even 6 different teams around Europe that they could potentially go to instead of Manchester United. Secondly, and I think this is probably an even more important point, each year that Manchester United are struggling, each year that Manchester United are becoming desperate, you're paying overinflated prices for players that aren't necessarily worth anywhere near that amount. So all of a sudden, not only are you not able to get the top players, the players that the top teams don't want, you're also then paying overinflated prices in the hope that this player could change things for you. And I think if you go back to when Manchester United were having all the success, I think Robin van Persie was a prime example, because I think there was a lot of talk of him going to Manchester City. He could probably have got more money. But he went to Manchester United because it was a team that were winning things, and he was proven right. He ended up winning the Premier League there. So that's what I think makes it even more difficult, as in terms of when you're trying to bring players in. Manchester United are always looking for game changers, and unfortunately, they're paying game changer prices. They're not getting game changer players, and for me, that's a huge problem for them as well.
When I look at the situation, Dan, and I see Villa, it was a 0-0 draw today. I thought a really important point for Erik ten Hag. It was so important they didn't lose. It was really more important they didn't lose badly, because I think we would have been maybe talking about his job. They scraped a 0-0. He, in his words, rotated Martinez and De Ligt and played Evans and Maguire. And in our language, mate, when we used to play, they were dropped. So I don't buy this rotation word. I mean, come on.
Not with centre backs.
Yeah, but my point, Danny, is looking at that squad of players, and let's say they're getting people back fit now. They're getting a number. I know some are not as much fit as you would like, but there's a decent group that's coming together now. Is this group good enough to sort of match the ambitions of the club, or really are we talking about actually they aren't good enough players? When you're talking about getting to the levels of being able to try and compete, going back to trying to win titles. We've seen Unai Emery work with a group of Aston Villa players, many who were part of Steven Gerrard's team, and look completely different. Could somebody else come into Manchester United and get a different tune, or are some of these players really not quite at the level that we thought, and maybe they've overpaid?
They're definitely overpaid for a number of players that aren't able to get in the starting 11 now. But one of the things that you see with the top teams, we're talking about the Premier League. You look at Arsenal, you look at Liverpool, you look at Manchester City, you look at Aston Villa now, you look at Newcastle, you look at what Chelsea are starting to do. All of those teams I've just mentioned, they're a really strong collective. My concern with Manchester United now for a long time is that when you watch them, they look like a team of individuals. And, Robbie, you played with some great players. But if you haven't got that collective spirit between you, where you're willing and you're prepared to do something that's not necessarily to your benefit to help one of your teammates, then you're going to have huge problems. And I think when you look at Manchester United, the amount of goals that they've conceded from set pieces, obviously going back to last season as well, conceding the turnover of possession. And for me, that's a lack of leadership, a lack of communication, a lack of concentration, and a lack of organisation. So you can have all of these players, individuals that may be really good individuals, but you then have to make them a collective. What would be really interesting, there's no way to ever know this, but if you look at the players that Manchester United have signed, imagine if some of them had gone to an Arsenal, a Liverpool, a Manchester City. would they be the players that they are now, or would they be better players? And I think a lot of them would end up being better players because they're going into a better environment. I think they're going into more of a collective squad where everybody's going to help each other. So I think whatever they're going to do, whether they end up keeping Ten Hag or, you know, whether it is a new manager that eventually comes in, you've got to try and unite this group of players, because a lot of the times players, there's some really talented players, but they look as though they're playing their own game instead of being invested in what should be an identity of a team.
Yeah, it's a really interesting point, and I'll take it a little bit further because, you know, I look at Rasmus Højlund today, and listen, we have the great Gary Neville with us, I think 8 Premier League titles and Champions Leagues and 17 trophies, like incredible haul. And I was, you know, picking his brain as the game was going on with players, and we were talking about Højlund, and I said, it must be so difficult for a young player signed into a football club, and you're sort of pushed into Manchester United. We know he's young, he's had some injury problems, he's getting back to fitness. But there's no real structure, set way of playing, Dan. So it must be a nightmare. You know, as a young kid going in a team, when, you know, we were all starting off, you need a structure. You need a couple of people around you helping you out and pushing you in the right places and making sure and encouraging you. I don't sense that this is quite the case at Manchester United. And another thing that came up, and I just want to get your thought before we maybe move on, and a quick line on Villa and we'll move on. But me and Gary were talking, and we kind of hit on a point and said, do you know, with that first team squad, how many players in that squad are probably somewhat unhappy or unhinged, however you want to say it? Like Casemiro, obviously not happy. Anthony, not happy. Rashford, you know, dragged off at half-time, rotation again, you know, and plays today, and you know, he makes De Ligt. Martinez dropped today. Garnacho probably feels he should be playing. You know, there's a lot of players who probably not feeling great about themselves or great about the club at the moment. And again, I'm not sure that's a great collective to bring the spirit, to bring the togetherness. Like, everybody's almost fighting for their own shirt, really, and their own back. Do you know what I mean? It was interesting that when Gary said about it today, I started thinking, yeah, how many of those players are really happy at the moment?
Well, I think, you know, the conversation that you and Gary obviously had about, you know, the way that players feel. You will have been at clubs where players are feeling exactly that way. I've been at clubs where players are feeling exactly that way. But the difference was you had those leaders in the dressing room who would put their arm around them, say, listen, you know, this is how it is. This is how things are going to get better. These are the things you've got to deal with. You know, the problem that you have at the moment at a club like Manchester United is that where are your senior figures? Because you know what it's like, Robbie. Not even the best teams, but the teams that are successful, whatever success is to them, the changing room is so strong. The changing room can take care of itself. If the manager had a problem sometimes with a player, the manager didn't have to sort it out. The players could sort it out. And, you know, you go back to Manchester United, you go back to that class of 92. It was unbelievable. But the reason they were able to be successful is that they went into a team that had so many players that were comfortable in their own skinners in terms of their own performances. And they were able to help the younger players. I remember I only played maybe 5 or 6 times for them, but I remember making my my Premier League debut. And in front of me, I had Roy Keane. To the right of me, I had Jaap Stam. I think Paul Scholes was playing. And every time when I got the ball, they would all make movements for me to make my life really easy. Whereas I think what is happening so often now, how many times have we heard, oh, Mainu's going to be the saviour, or Garnacho's going to be the saviour?
Relying on young individuals, kids.
And they're young kids, and all of a sudden you're expecting them to be leaders in what is a team that has gone through a rough patch for a long time. When young players come in and be successful, more often than not, it's not the way that Garnacho and Mainu have been successful. It's coming in and playing alongside your leaders. If you look at Manchester United, the Brian Robsons, the Roy Keanes, the Gary Nevilles, you know, the Jaap Stams. But they're actually being asked to come into this team and change this team from like 7th or 8th place team to a 4th place team. You want younger players coming into a team that's already on its way to being that. So therefore, pressure that you're putting on young players is very, very tough. And the last thing I'll say on this, and it's something that I've always thought about Manchester United, if you look at the young players that come through at that club, they're the ones that when they go and play for the first team, they look the most comfortable in terms of the mentality, because they've been brought up in that atmosphere.
Yeah.
Whereas I think some players come from other clubs and it's like, wow, this is great. This is Manchester United. All of a sudden, that shirt becomes very, very heavy for certain players. And I think that is the case. I think that's the case for some players at the moment. And that's not going to enable you to get back to where you want to be.
Well, it wasn't a great game.
Sir Jim Ratcliffe's decision immediately after Man United crisis meeting speaks volumes. Manchester United's bosses were involved in a lengthy meeting, which centred around Erik ten Hag's future, and Sir Jim Ratcliffe made a backdoor exit to dodge questions. Sir Jim Ratcliffe chose to leave out the back door, and in doing so dodged the media, after a 7-hour crisis meeting with senior figures at Manchester United. The INEOS chief, now the minority owner, arrived in London on Tuesday morning to take part in discussions with the likes of Joel Glazer and CEO Omar Barada. High on their agenda was the future of Erik ten Hag, who has come under mounting pressure despite it still being early in the season. Sporting director Dan Ashworth, technical director Jason Wilcox and director Sir Dave Brailsford were also present for the talks, which began at 10 a.m. and finished just before 5 p.m. Ratcliffe and Brailsford then left through a rear entrance to avoid the waiting media. Ratcliffe and the senior figures he brought to Manchester considered a managerial change in the summer following United's worst-ever Premier League season. They scoured the market and held discussions, but eventually opted to stick by ten Hag. The Dutchman was handed a new one-year deal, which came after Head delivered the FA Cup. The shock victory over Manchester City helped ten Hag retain his job, but already there are serious questions over his role. United have endured their worst-ever start to a Premier League season despite their manager being handed more funds in the summer. He continued to go after former players with Matthijs de Ligt signed from Bayern Munich. That has done little to solve United's issues though, with their defence still a major problem. Thief continued to ship goals, losing 3-0 at home to Tottenham and Liverpool. Recent draws with Porto and Aston Villa have done little to inspire. Ratcliffe was present at Villa Park, alongside the likes of Sir Dave Brailsford, to watch the Red Devils draw 0-0. The INEOS chief was quizzed last week on whether ten Hag would remain as manager but claimed it wasn't his call, instead wanting the senior figures he hired to make a decision. He said, "I like Erik. I think he's a very good coach, but at the end of the day it's not my call," said Ratcliffe, who has overhauled the club's board structure and executive team since investing £1.25 billion for a 27.7% stake in the club. It's the management team that's running Manchester United that have to decide how we best run the team in many different respects. But that team that's running Manchester United has only been together since June or July. They weren't there in January, February, March or April. CEO Omar Barada, sporting director Dan Ashworth, they only arrived in July. They've only been there, you can count it in weeks almost, they've not been there a long time, so they need to take stock and make some sensible decisions. He maintained, "Our objective is very clear, we want to take Manchester United back to where it should be, and it's not there yet, obviously, that's very clear." Erik ten Hag believes he is safe from Man United sack as board meeting looms. With the club languishing in 14th in the Premier League, the club's executive committee meets in London this week. Under pressure, Erik ten Hag believes he retains Manchester United's backing as the club's power brokers prepare to meet in London on Tuesday. Ten Hag's position is under intense scrutiny after United's worst-ever start to a Premier League season. United co-owners Sir Jim Ratcliffe and Joel Glazer are due to attend an executive committee meeting alongside other members of the Old Trafford hierarchy, including Sir Dave Brailsford, Chief Executive Omar Barada, Sporting Director Dan Ashworth and Technical Director Jason Wilcox. The meeting has not been specially convened to discuss ten Hag's future and has been in the diary for some time as part of efforts for the executives to meet once a month. The last such meeting took place in Barcelona last month during the first stage of the America's Cup, which Ratcliffe's Ineos Britannia team will compete to win in the 13-race series starting on Saturday. But United's poor start to the season, despite a £200 million summer outlay that took transfer spending under ten Hag past £600 million, has raised new questions about ten Hag's suitability for the job. Although the situation has caused alarm and consternation at Old Trafford, ten Hag is not thought to have been given any indication his future is under immediate threat after Sunday's 0-0 draw at Aston Villa. The fourth time in 5 league games United have failed to score left them languishing in 14th place. United have taken just 8 points from their opening 7 matches, which has included shambolic 3-0 defeats to Liverpool and Tottenham. The club have been focusing on supporting Ten Hag and his staff, and the manager is understood to have left for a short holiday, working very much on the basis that he expects to be in charge when United return to action against Brentford on Saturday week after the international break. United's first-team players who are not involved in internationals over this period have also been afforded some time off. Former England manager Gareth Southgate is among those in the frame to replace Ten Hag should United opt for a change. Thomas Tuchel, the former Chelsea and Bayern Munich manager who was one of 6 managers interviewed by United at the end of last season before the club decided to keep faith with the Ten Hag, also continues to be heavily linked with the post. Joel Glazer and Ratcliffe were both pictured at Old Trafford on Monday after flying in from the US. Glazer is understood to have attended the quarterly Fans Advisory Board meeting, one of several he was due to attend before travelling down to London ahead of the Executive Committee meeting. Despite the questions around Ten Hag, the Dutchman received support from former United captain Wayne Rooney on Monday. Rooney said United's players need to do better and that he was confident Ten Hag is a fantastic manager and hoped he would get time to turn things around. Rooney, who scored a club record 253 goals in 559 appearances for United before departing in 2017, said it was difficult to see them languishing in the bottom half of the table. When asked if Ten Hag was the right man for the job, Rooney, now the Plymouth manager, said, "Well, that's obviously down to the owners of the football club to look at that. I'm sure Erik Ten Hag is a fantastic manager. Has won trophies wherever has been and won trophies at Manchester United as well. So yes, has going through a difficult period, and I think he'd probably say that himself. But you hope he can turn it around because too often managers lose their jobs and then it's another rebuild with a different manager. I think it's difficult, and anyone would admit that Manchester United want to be challenging for titles, so to be 14th, I'm sure everyone at the club knows they need to improve on that. I know Erik Ten Hag is doing everything he can to try and improve that. Players again, and I said this last season, need to do better than what they're doing. There's a big turnaround of players over the last few years. You just want to see them challenging again. I think they showed good spirit to pick up a point against Villa, but the fans probably want to see a bit more, and hopefully they can start doing that.